All right, let's get started. We're going to do the second half of our chapter 19 lecture notes. And so let me see if I can find where we left off. We were right here at earnings per share. I'm at the top of page 4 of your notes. And so basically the basic earnings per share formula that you guys learned was just net income divided by shares. But of course, we've got to make it a tiny bit harder than that, right? So basically what we're going to look at is we're looking at earnings per share as it relates to our common stockholders. So not all stockholders, because the preferred stockholders get preferential treatment related to dividends. And so we know what we're going to give them. So we're going to remove that from the net income, and then we're going to divide by the number of common shares outstanding. But sometimes the number of common shares outstanding during the year changes. And so then we have to figure out, do we use beginning of the year common stock, end of the year common stock? And the answer is neither. We're going to use a weighted average number of common shares outstanding. And so what that means is you're going to calculate the weighted average number of common shares that are outstanding by doing like a monthly average of what the number of shares outstanding during the year was. So we're going to start off with our net income after taxes. We're going to remove the preferred dividends, especially if we pay them. But if they're cumulative, we remove them even if we haven't paid them. If they're non-cumulative, you only remove them if you pay them. So remember cumulative versus non-cumulative. Cumulative means that you keep track of dividends and arrears. Non-cumulative means you don't. So if it's cumulative, even if you don't pay them, you still subtract the preferred dividends. And then in the denominator, we divide by the weighted average number of common shares outstanding. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to calculate that. So there's several practice questions looking at that. Here's a basic question first. It says a company had 200,000 shares of $50 par value common stock and 10,000 shares of 5% 20 par value cumulative preferred stock. I love when they give you like a big handful of things and then you have to sort through what that means, right? So what that means is 10,000 shares of 5% $20 par value. So the par value is what goes in the preferred stock account. The 5% is the stated dividend rate. So what that means is 5% of the $20. So the dividend rate is $1 a share. Cumulative means that it does accumulate. So basically we need to give $1 a share to 10,000 shareholders. And then there's also 30,000 shares of 5% $10 par value, non-cumulative preferred stock. So when it says non-cumulative, that's not normal. We don't deal with that hardly at all, but non-cumulative means no arrears and 5% of the $10 par value. So 50 cents a share. And there's 30,000 shares of those. Net income is 1.5 million. No dividends were declared during the year. So to calculate this, and you might want to hit pause and try to calculate it yourself. Obviously, I would like wait a minute and let you guys try. I'd probably run to the bathroom because usually by 10 after 11, I've got to go because I've been teaching all morning. So I'd run to the restroom while you guys try to figure this out yourself. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the net income and then we're going to subtract from that the preferred dividends, especially if we pay them. If we do not pay them, we only subtract the cumulative ones. So we're going to go to our cumulative ones, and we're going to figure out what the cumulative dividends for the preferred stock is. So 10,000 shares of 5% $20 par value cumulative preferred stock. So 5% of $20 is $1 a share, 10,000 shares. So we're going to subtract out 10,000. And then from there, we're going to take that. So we would need to go ahead and do this in our calculator. Divided by the weighted average number of common shares outstanding. So these are preferred, these are preferred. Here are common shares outstanding. So 200,000 shares. So I'm going to take 1,490,000. All right, so my answer is $7.45. So it looks like my answer is C in that multiple choice question. Okay, so that's just some practice at using this formula. And so you'll have homework problems for next time doing some earnings per share calculations, and then you'll have more homework for Friday doing earnings per share calculations. So what we need to do is we need to figure out what the weighted average number of common shares outstanding is. And so when it doesn't change through the year, it's a lot easier, right? And most of the time it doesn't. This chapter makes it seem like we change the number of shares all the time, but the truth is, rarely do we change the number of common shares outstanding. Normally they stay the same, like all the way through, because rarely do you like go out and issue more shares. But in these examples, we're going to change it a bunch of times. So let's go ahead and look and see what happens when that happens. So what we've got here is on January 1, we have 200,000 shares. On June 1, we're going to issue 60,000 more shares. And on August 1, we're going to issue 40,000 more shares. So we're going to change the number of shares. And so I think we can acknowledge that at the end of December, there's 300,000 shares outstanding because there was 200,000, and then we put 60,000 more out there and 40,000 more out there. But during the year, what is the weighted average number of shares? So first I'm going to show you the way the book teaches you to do it, and it works. It works completely. And so the other way though is to just find a monthly average. So basically these shares were outstanding for the entire year. So we're going to do 12 out of 12 right here. So that gives us 200,000 shares. These 60,000 shares were not issued until June 1. So they were outstanding. They were out there during June, July, August, September, October, November, December, 7/12. So if you take 7/12 of 60,000, you get 35,000. For some reason what's under there might be wrong. No, it's good, okay? So these shares went out into the market on August 1. August, September, October, November, December, 5 out of 12. So 5 out of 12 on 40,000 is a weird number. So I think I meant to change it so that it wasn't a weird number, but that's where we're at. And so we're just going to go with it. So 200,000 plus 35,000 plus 16667 means that our weighted average number of common shares outstanding is 251,667. So what that means is if you were doing this calculation that we did in this practice one up here, in the denominator downstairs, you would use 251,667. Now, that doesn't mean that's how many shares you had at the end of the year. At the end of the year, clearly we had 300,000 shares, but the average number of shares is 251,667. So this method works. Months outstanding. We've done this calculation before when we did AAE, average accumulated expenditures. I think it was in chapter, I don't know, 10 maybe. But what I like to do, because I'm kind of weird, is I like to just look at each month. Just to show you that this works. Okay. So in January, you had 200,000 shares, and you had that until June 1. But in June 1, you issued, I think it said 60,000 additional shares. Yeah, 60,000 additional shares on June 1. So in June, you had 260,000, and in July. But in August, you issued another 40. So then you had 300,000 August through December. So we can see the actual number of shares that we had each month, and then we can just do an average. And there's that 251,667 number. So that's just another way to find the answer. So you can use this way to check yourself if you want to, or you can just use the book method. The book method said basically that you had 200,000 shares times 12 out of 12. You had 60,000 shares times 7 out of 12, and you had 40,000 shares times 5 of the months out of 12. And then do that calculation, add it together, and you'll get 251,667. So let's look at another complication to this. Oops, I keep going to that. Okay, so stock splits and stock dividends. A stock split and a stock dividend will both be called retroactive, meaning that you assume they've been outstanding the entire year. Even if you do a stock dividend or a stock split at the end of the year, like if you do it on December 15th, doesn't matter. You pretend that it's outstanding for the entire year. So let's go ahead and let's do an example. On this example, we're going to start off, and I think I changed the dates a little, but maybe not. Yeah, I think I moved that one to 5/1. So we're going to start off on January 1 with 200,000 shares. On May 1, we're going to issue an additional 60. On August 1, you're going to do a stock dividend of 50%. So that means that you're going to dump an additional 130,000 shares out into the market. So this 130,000 shares is because right now there's 260 out there. And so the 130,000 is half of that. And so when we do that, 100,000 of it relate to this 200 and 30,000 relate to this 60. So when I said that they're retroactive to the beginning of the year, they're retroactive to when the shares were established. So this 30,000 is affiliated with this 60, so it has to be since May 1. So let's just go through and do this calculation. So this one would be 12 out of 12 for 200,000. This 60, May 1, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, 8 months. So this 60,000 is going to be 8/12. And so 8/12 gives you 40,000. So then we do the exact same thing here. This 100,000 is because of this 200,000, so it'll be 12 out of 12. This 30 is because of this 60, so it will be 8 out of 12. So that will give you an additional 100,000 at 12 out of 12 is an additional 100,000. And 30,000 at 8 out of 12 is going to be what, 20,000? Okay, so 30,000 times 8 divided by 12. And then on October 1, we're going to issue 40,000 more shares. So October 1, October, November, December, 3/12. So 3/12 of 40,000 is 10,000. So then our total number of shares outstanding is 200, 40, 120, and 10, 370. All right. So again, we've made these, this is, again, that's all we've done right now is calculate what would go in the denominator. So if there's treasury stock or stock that's pulled out of the market, then it's just a reduction. So you just minus it. So it says the weighted average number of shares outstanding is reduced by the number of reacquired shares, time weighted for the fraction of the year they were not outstanding. So let's do that one. So the 200,000 shares were outstanding for the entire time. So we'll do 12 out of 12, 200,000. But on April 1, we are going to remove 25,000 shares out of the market. So basically what would happen is if we were doing this calculation on January 1, it would be like, I want to just go do that because I think sometimes that kind of helps us to make sense of it. Ooh, that's really tiny. Okay, I'm just going to go over here and do it. So if we were to use this example and do this, we had 200,000 shares January, February, and March. And then I don't remember what happened after that. Okay, so back over here. April 1, 25,000 shares would be removed. So now we do 175 for the rest of the time, right? But I think on October 1 or August 1, we're going to dump 40,000 more in. So 175 plus 40, 215. So that should be our answer. Ooh, it's ugly. Sorry. Okay. So like literally what we're trying to do is we're trying to calculate the number of months. And so on this April 1, we're going to remove 25,000 shares from April through December. Let's go back over here. So April 1 through December 31 is 9/12. So this is going to be a reduction. So if we take 25,000 times 9/12, it's 18,750, and that's a minus. And then there's 40,000 that comes in August, September, October, November, December. It's kind of lame that I can't count that on my head in my head. 5/12, so 40,000 times 5 divided by 12 is 16,667. So when we add these together, then we get 197,917, which I think is what we had over here. Yeah, 197,917. So this would be the denominator in our calculation. So let's actually start calculating some earnings per share, because all we've done right now is mess around with what the denominator might look like. And I think that's what you're mainly doing for homework between Monday and Wednesday, but I want to keep going here. This is to help you with your homework due Wednesday and to help you with your homework due on Friday. So the reserve company had 606 million shares of common shares outstanding on January 1. The following activities affected common shares during the year. There are no potential common shares outstanding. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Okay. Oh, that means that maybe we didn't issue any additional shares after that. I don't know. That's a weird sentence. Okay. February 27th, we purchased 18 million shares of treasury stock. So that means we removed shares from the market. Then on November 29th, we issued 72 million new shares. So we did not. Oh, okay, sorry. February 27th, we purchased 18 million shares of treasury stock. Then we put those shares back in the market on October 30th. November 29th, we put 72 million new shares out of the market. Net income is 1,200 million. Is that 1,200 million? Oh, okay. So February 27th is where we're going to make our first transaction. But here we're going to start off with 606 million shares. Those shares are outstanding 12 out of 12, because then what we're going to do when we repurchase them is we're going to reduce for those, and then we'll throw them back in and throw them back in again. Okay. So this 606 will be 12 out of 12 for 606 million. Then we're going to remove 18 million. And that reduction is for the number of shares outstanding. And so it's February 27th. So we're just going to do March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, 10 months. And so 10/12 of 18 million is going to be minus 15 million. Okay. Then we're going to put those 18 million shares back into the market on October 30th. So we're not going to include October because it's almost over, but we're just going to do November, December, 2/12. So 18 million times 2 divided by 12 is 3 million. And then we're going to put 72 million new shares in the market. And that's on 11/29. So again, I'm not going to include November. There's a chance that you would do fractional months here, like you'd be like 1.5 or 1 or whatever. So we're just going to do 1/12 here, and you'll always be able to just do whole months. So 1/12, 1/12 of 72, 72 divided by 12, 6. Oh, those are such nice clean numbers. 6 million. So if we're trying to figure out the weighted average number of common shares outstanding, 600. Oh, that's a nice number. 600 million. So if you wanted to go do it in Excel, just because I like to, I'm going to take this calculation, and these numbers are going to be in millions, but I'm going to do 606, 606. Then I'm going to reduce it by 18 and do 588, 588, 588, 588, 588. And then I think those shares came back in the market on October 30. So still doing 588 for all those. And then here I go back up to 606, and then I go up by 72 more for 678. So if we do an average of all of that, it's 600. I kind of like to screw around with it like that, just because it kind of helps me to understand like literally what the math did. So 600 million is where we end. But I do want to note that, oh, by the way, we need to go ahead and calculate out what the earnings per share is now. So EPS would equal net income minus preferred dividends, and then divide by weighted average number common shares outstanding. I'm laughing at myself because I'm hilarious. Okay, so there were no preferred dividends. There were no preferred stockholders. And maybe that's what this was supposed to say, no preferred shares outstanding. I don't know, but there was no mention of preferred shares. So we would just take the net income of 1,200 million divided by 600, and it looks like my earnings per share is 2. Okay, so I'm going to clean this up a tiny bit. I want this to move up. There, that's better. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and go back to the next year. And the next year says that on January 14th, we're going to do a 2-for-1 stock split. So that's the only thing that's going to happen next year. But the first thing I have to know is how many shares I have at the end of the year. So a lot of students want to start your next table with 600 million because they're like, oh, you had 600 million last year. That's what you start with. But that's not true. That's the average number we had all year. But if you remember, right at the end, we issued 72. So the number of shares we're going to start with is 606 minus 18 plus 18 plus 72. So 606 plus 72 is 678. And I actually saw that when I did it in Excel. And that's why I kind of like to do it that way. So 678 million shares is what I'm going to start with. And those shares are outstanding for the entire time. And then our stock split is retroactive. So at first, when I first saw this, the first time I was doing this, I was like, oh crap, January 14th, do I do like a half a month? Like, what do I do there? But then I remembered that stock splits are retroactive. So it doesn't matter if this was January 14th or December 14th, I'm going to do the whole 12 out of 12. So another 678 million, 12 out of 12 gives me another 678 million. And so the total number of shares is 1356. Oops. So because there's twice as many shares out there in the market, that's going to really affect our earnings per share. So your earnings per share is going to be the net income of 1,200 million divided by 1,356 million shares. So 1,200 divided by 1,356, our earnings per share now is only 88 cents. So as an investor, earnings per share is the most popular number they look at. Like, they should look at like all the numbers, like they should look at the whole income statement and stuff, as we as accountants like look at everything, right? But investors like tend to look at earnings per share and they're like, that's interesting. I made $2 a share this year. And then the next year, like 88 cents, like what happened? Well, what happened is they flooded the market with an additional 678 million shares. So your share is now worth half as much as it used to be. Plus some, because last year they put another 72 in the market really late. So remember that dividends on preferred stock is going to be subtracted. And so if it's cumulative, it's always subtracted. If it's non-cumulative, you only subtract it if we pay it. So the next thing we need to look at is basic earnings per share and diluted earnings per share. So diluted earnings per share is one of the last topics that we get to discuss. And it's one of my favorite topics. I know I say that about a lot of topics. So you guys have heard me say that over and over and over again, and I'm aware. But diluted earnings per share, what we're going to do is a what if analysis. Like, what if some of our bonds that are convertible are converted into shares of stock? Like, what would it do to earnings per share? So diluted earnings per share, what we do is we look at each dilutive security and determine if it makes earnings per share go up or down. If it makes it go down, then we have to report it. If it makes it go up, we don't have to. So again, right now you have no idea what I'm talking about. So we need to do some. So there are several different items that may make your earnings per share go down. But a good one to think about is convertible bonds. So if we have convertible bonds, that means that we learned about those in chapter 14. That means that the bonds can be cashed in for shares of common stock. So you flip over your bond and be like, okay, so I can trade this bond in for 100 shares of stock. And when I get my bond, I look and stock's trading for $7 a share. And I'm like, I don't want to convert it. I'm going to keep it. And then if this is a 10-year bond, midway through, if in year 6 or 7, you look and you get your interest payment, because remember on bonds, you get interest semi-annually. You get your interest and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that bond. Isn't that convertible? And you go and you look at the stock price and it's trading for $18 a share. And you're like, wow, I can turn in this bond, this $1,000 bond, for $18 a share, 100 shares for $1,800. So if everyone converts their bonds, because we have no idea if an investor is going to do it or not. We have no idea, but they might. So what if everyone did? Well, if everyone did, then we would not have to pay interest anymore because you wouldn't have to pay that interest, but you'd have a lot more shares in the market. So what you do is you do a what if analysis to see what it would do to your earnings per share if the bond was converted. And then you calculate your new earnings per share. And if the number goes up, then that means that it did not dilute it. Dilute means to water down. And so, or to bring down your earnings per share. So if it's dilutive, then you have to report diluted earnings per share on your income statement. So let's go ahead and do this. So, we are not going to do this example. So go ahead and just cross through this one. We are going to jump to convertible securities and stuff, and we're going to use this if converted method. So let's go ahead and go to the bottom of page 7, and let's go through this example instead, because these are going to be the ones, like, there's going to be a couple of these on your final, and there's quite a bit of homework doing it too. So assume net income after tax of $500,000, cumulative convertible preferred stock dividends of $25,000, common stock outstanding 50,000 shares, and a tax rate of 30%. The convertible preferred stock is convertible into 5,000 shares of common stock. So we've never really talked about convertible preferred stock before, but if someone buys preferred stock and they'd rather have common, we let them sometimes trade it in for common shares. So it looks like they can trade in their common share or their preferred shares for common shares. So if they do that, what would happen? So first we're going to calculate earnings per share just like normal. This is called basic earnings per share. So the net income is 500,000. The cumulative, so by the way, this says cumulative, so we don't even need to know if they actually paid them or not. Cumulative convertible preferred stock dividends of 25. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 500,000. I'm going to put a bracket around it just to make sure that when I put it in my calculator, I do it right. Divided by 50,000 common shares outstanding. So I'm going to take 475 divided by 50. And I got earnings per share of $9.50. Okay, so cumulative convertible preferred stock dividends of 25,000 were paid this year. We have 500,000 of net income. We have 50,000 of common shares outstanding. We're going to need the tax rate in a few minutes. So now what we need to do is we need to find out, so this is called basic earnings per share. We need to find out what would happen if all of these preferred stock people converted into common stock. So what would literally happen, and we're going to do it on the next page, is we would not have to pay the preferred stock dividends. So instead of taking 475 divided by 50, we're going to take 500, and then if these people converted, there would be 5,000 more shares here. So we're going to increase that by 5. So we're going to go 500 minus 0 if converted, divided by 55,000 common shares. So let's try that. So if the preferred stock is converted, there would be an additional 5,000 shares. The new calculation is. So my net income is still 500,000. And I'm going to go ahead just to make sure that we know that I'm doing it right and subtract 0, because we wouldn't have to pay the preferred dividends anymore. And now in the denominator, I'm going to divide by 55,000 shares because I used to have 50,000 common shares. Now I have 55. So if I do 500 divided by 55, I get 909. So this is called diluted earnings per share. So because earnings per share went down, I have to report this on my financial statements. Let's do another one. Assume net income of 500,000, and instead of convertible stock, we have convertible bonds with interest expense of 50,000. Common stock outstanding 50,000 shares, tax rate 30%. The bonds are convertible into 2,000 shares of common stock. So first, let's go ahead and calculate basic earnings per share. So we're going to do 500,000. And there is no mention, this is a separate problem, okay? There's no mention, and we're going to have ones where we have both, and I'll do those in a little bit. But there's no mention of any preferred dividends, and so I'm just going to do minus 0. And my common shares outstanding and my basic model is going to be 50,000 shares. So 50,000 shares gives me $10 or basic earnings per share. Okay, So then what we have to do is we have to say, well, what if all of our convertible bonds are converted into stock? Well, there would be 2,000 more shares out there. So in the downstairs, I'm going to change that 50,000 to 52. So that's the easy part, right? And then on the top part, I will not have to pay the interest expense. So I need to add the interest expense back because it's an expense, so it would reduce net income. So I need to put it back in there. So that would make our net income go up by 50,000. But that 500,000 is already net of taxes. So when I increase it, I need to increase it after taxes. So we won't have to pay the 50,000. With the increase, we'll have to pay an extra 30% of the 50,000 to the government. So really the increase is only 35,000. So basically what I would do, let's see if I can. No, I would do 7. Yeah, only 70% of, because 30% of the 50,000 is going to go to the government. So only 35,000 gets added back. So up top, I'm going to do 535. So I can do it like this and say 500,000 plus 35,000. So here I did 50,000 times 0.7 equals $35,000 increase, just so I can show my work a little bit. Okay. So 535, and still, now I don't have any preferred dividends, so I'm not going to pay any preferred dividends. And then downstairs I have 52,000. So I'm going to do 535 divided by 52, and my earnings per share went up. So that's 10.29. So this is called anti-dilutive. So that means you don't have to report it, because if everybody converted, we only went up by 2,000 shares, but our net income went up by 35. So it actually would make it better off for our investors. So that means that you don't have to report it. You can report it in your notes if you want, but you don't have to. So let's do another one. So this one is a little bit fancier. So dilutive earnings per share example, we have net income of 850,000. We have preferred stock dividends of 30,000. Our number of common shares outstanding is 110. We have 1,000,000 8% bonds convertible to 30,000 shares of common stock. And then we have preferred stock that's convertible into 20,000 shares of common stock. And so my first question is the preferred stock dilutive? And then we do, is the bonds dilutive? And so if one is dilutive and the other one isn't, then you just report the one. But if both are dilutive, then you have to do a what if on both. So that's where it gets kind of fun in my weird definition of fun. So first of all, we need to just calculate basic earnings per share. So basic earnings per share is the net income of 850,000 minus the preferred dividends. And I would need to know if those are cumulative or if we actually paid them or whatever, but my assumption is I either paid them or they're cumulative. They'll tell you in the homework problems. And then the weighted average number of common shares outstanding is 110,000. So my basic earnings per share is just net income minus this divided by this. So 850 minus 30 divided by 110. And I got 7.45. So that's basic. Basic. So then if I convert the preferred stock, then I would not have to pay preferred dividends, but I would have an extra 20,000 shares. So I like this example because I think it's clean. So I would do 850,000 minus 0. And then instead of dividing by 110 shares, I've got now 130 shares. So 850 divided by 130, because we dumped an additional 20,000 shares into the market. 850 divided by 130 gives me 6.54. So it is dilutive. So, okay. So if we do the next one and it came in as anti-dilutive, then we would just report basic and this one for dilutive. So first of all, we're going to check them independently. So we're going to look at one, the other. If there's 7, we're going to look at 7 different ones independently. Like, what is the effect of that one security to the earnings per share? So first of all, when we do basic earnings per share, it'll be just like it was above. Thank you. 850,000 minus 30,000 divided by 110,000 shares. So my basic earnings per share is just like it was above, 745. So if we convert the bonds, then what we're going to do is we're going to assume all of the bonds are converted. So our downstairs is going to go up by 30. So in the denominator, we're going to go to 140. Now we're looking at this independently. So we still have the preferred dividends. So the preferred dividends will still be in there, but we're going to have to increase the net income because we will not have to pay this interest. So the interest is, $1 million times 0.08. So the interest is 80,000, but we need to do that net of taxes. So what's our tax rate? They have to tell us our tax rate. Oh, there it is. Assume a 30% tax rate. Okay. So we're going to take that times 0.7 because 30% of it will go to taxes. So our net income will be going up by 56,000. So I guess I could show my work a little bit right here. And I would say 1 million times 0.08 equals 80,000 interest times 70%, because 30% of it goes to the government, is a $56,000 increase in net income. Okay, so just thought I'd show my work a little bit. So the 56 goes up from 850, so that gives us 906. We still have our preferred dividends, and then in the denominator, it's going to go up to 140, because if all of our bondholders convert to stock, then we'll have an additional 30,000 shares of stock. So if we do that, then we would do 906 minus 30 divided by 140, 6.26. Aha. So this one is also dilutive. So since both securities were dilutive, then what we have to do is we have to convert both of them. So now we have to do a combined version of this. So our basic earnings per share is still 745, but what if the bonds were converted and the stock was converted? So our new net income would be 906. We would have no preferred dividends because all of them got converted. And in the denominator, we would have 110,000 shares and 30 more and 20 more. So we would have 160,000 shares. I love this. Okay, so okay, so my net income went up because I don't have to pay the interest. My preferred dividends went down because they're not preferred dividends anymore. And my number of shares went up because of the convertible bonds and because of the convertible stock. So 906 divided by 160. Why are you laughing? Go away. 5.66 is what? Can you have your phone now? No, you can't have your phone. Go away. So 5.66 is the answer for combined dilutive earnings per share. That was such a good problem. Okay. Is there another one? Yeah, there is. Okay. And so we'll do one more example and then we're done. And so what we've got here is common shares each year, convertible preferred shares. They're convertible into 32,000 shares of common stock and some 10% convertible bonds. It's $1 million, so that means the interest is 100,000, convertible into 30,000 shares of common stock. Net income 500,000. I'm guessing that's already net of tax. The tax rate is 40%. I'm just going to assume because I don't really know. And then Ames paid a 5% per share dividend on the preferred stock. Yeah. So the 40% is the tax rate, but I'm assuming that this 500,000 is already net of taxes. So the first thing I need to do is I need to find out what basic earnings per share is, because that's my basis to determine if the stock is dilutive or the bonds are dilutive. And I have to consider each of them independently. And then if both of them are dilutive, then we have to combine it. So basic earnings per share is net income, 500,000, minus preferred shares, $5 per share on our preferred stock. There's 12,000 shares of preferred stock. So 12,000 shares at $5 a share. Is that right? 60,000. So my preferred dividends are 60,000, and I'm going to divide by the weighted average number of common shares outstanding, 100,000. So that would be 440 divided by 100, $4.40. And that's my basic. Okay. And then what I'm looking at are the convertible preferred shares. So the convertible preferred shares, are they dilutive or not? So the new number of shares, if these people convert, then I would have an additional 32,000 shares. So I'd have 132,000, but we would pay no preferred dividends. So to calculate if it's dilutive or not, we would do 500,000 minus 0, and then instead we would divide by 132,000. So 500 divided by 132, 3.79. So I'll just put, yep, it's dilutive. Okay, oops. Oh, look, I already had it underneath. Is dilutive. Okay. So now let's check to see if the convertible bonds are dilutive. And so basic earnings per share is still 440. And then our new number of shares, if our bonds convert, then we'll have an additional 30,000 shares. So we'll go up to 130. And then we would not have to pay interest. So our savings, our interest, I would have to find it, but it's $1 million at 10%, which is 100,000 net of taxes. And then our tax rate was what? 40%. So this time I'll take it times 60%. Or it would save us $60,000 if we did not have to pay the interest. So my new net income, it used to be 500,000. So now I'm going to use 560,000. And I am still going to subtract the preferred dividends because I'm just trying to look at the effect of just this one item. So my preferred dividends are still $5 a share times 12, 60,000. And then I'm going to divide by 130,000. I'm guessing it's dilutive because it says is dilutive. 3.85. So again, went down means dilutive. Okay. So we would actually have to do a combined one. And so what we would need to do is, oh, I did it here. Okay. So I was like, why can't I, where is this supposed to be? So what we would do is we would convert both. So in the denominator, we would have 100,000 plus 32 plus 30. So we would have 162,000 shares downstairs. We would need to remove the preferred dividends because our preferred stockholders all converted, and we would need to increase net income by that bond's interest savings. So our new calculation would be 560. Wait, oh yeah, down here, 560 minus 0 divided by 162, or 3.46. So this is the answer. So we would have basic earnings per share of 440 and dilutive of 346, which makes sense because this was 3.79 and this was 3.85. So it's going to go down more than that. So 346. All right, and the last topic just talks about a little bit about how if you have unusual items, remember how on the income statements we did CDE, continuing, discontinued, extraordinary items? You report on all three of those numbers net of taxes, and you report all three earnings per share numbers on. So, all right, that's our last bit of notes for this entire class. All right, you guys have a great evening or day or whatever time you're watching this video. I hope you're doing well. I'll talk to you soon.